Mm, I love those blues. Well, welcome everybody. We're glad that you're here on our Friends Forum. And I just want to take a minute and say thank you to each of you individually and churches that support the retreat at Church Creek through Pastors Collective. You're making a difference, and we're making a difference. And I really do appreciate that. I think well, I won't give a number, but we've got a lot of churches that support us every month as a part of their missions budget to help pastors live well and finish strong. And we really, really, really appreciate that and appreciate you. I also wanted to say, before we get into what I'm going to talk about today, that if you would like weekly encouragement every Sunday morning, you can text the word pastor to 833-349-7516. Text pastor, and that's all, nothing else, just the word pastor, to 833-349-7516. I decided a couple of years ago, really, I feel like one of my gifts is the gift of encouragement, and I want to leverage that to as many people as I can. And I thought, what if I sent a little text out to pastors every Sunday morning before they preach, just to say, hey, encouragement, maybe a little word, and let them know that I'm thinking about them, praying for them. And that turned into a video about a year ago, and we've got, I think, over 1,000 pastors now that receive the text. And so if you'd like to have that, I'd love to just give you a little encouragement every morning. I recorded this week's just this morning, and I just really enjoy doing that. So today what I want to talk about is I want to talk about succession, transitioning your church to the next generation. I think we have a title of something like How to Transition Without Killing the Church. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I think for us, it's been a little bit better than that. But I want to introduce my son, Josh Surratt. Hey, Josh, how you doing? Can you hear
I'm
me?
doing great. I think you could have called it How to Transition a Church Without Killing the new lead pastor or the old lead pastor or the church. There are a lot of fatalities that could happen in transition, but glad to be here.
There really are. And hopefully we'll talk about a few of them. I think this is the first time it's just been a sit down with you and I to reflect on what do we know so far? What are we learning? I know we've done podcasts for other people, but this should be fun. And I'm really looking forward to it. You know, we've both seen churches struggle with leadership transition. I'd like to say all of them do well. I don't know what the percentage is, but we know we have friends and we've heard other stories. We've had people call us that it doesn't do well, and ours went differently, and we want to share why. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
And I
So,
think for us, it's going to be fun just to tell our story. I don't know that everything would be prescriptive because every transition has unique leaders involved and unique, polity within the church and all that fun stuff. But I think there are a ton of transferable principles that we've learned, both how to do it well and probably some mistakes that we've made
yeah,
along the way. So
yeah, and our situation is every situation is unique. Ours is unique in that we have the same last name and share a little bit of the same DNA. Although you're your own man, I'm my own man. But yeah, let's jump in. I thought what we do. Let me talk a little bit about the when and why that I started to think about transition. But I guess before we do, no, let's do that. Let's do that. And then we'll talk about something else. It's easy for me to spider web, especially on a subject like this. Um, I was in my late 50s and several things happened. We had a leadership team at that point that I think Byron Davis, retired CEO Fisher Price Toys, was a part of that. My brother, Jeff Surratt, Brandon, or not Brandon, Mac Lake, now known as Brandon Lake's, dad. you know what would be fun? We ought to do another one of these and just bring all those guys on and just hear their perspective. I don't know why I didn't do that this time, but anyway, they were all on our leadership team, and I think it was Byron who said, "Hey, have you thought about who's going to do this after you in transition?" And we have some things in our bylaws that provide for how that process goes. Um, And when he first said that, I thought, I'm young, I got a lot of years. I don't know that, that's something I've given a lot of thought to. And then, so they began to talk about it and say, we're not kicking you out. That's not the deal. But there's a lot at stake here. And in the business world where he came from, they put a lot of thought into that. And I think in church world, until fairly recently, I'm not sure there was a lot of thought, put in that process. And so they asked me if you would just do one thing, because in our bylaws, if I finish well as a lead pastor, I have the opportunity to present a candidate for the next, whoever follows me. And then there's a process for whether that goes or not. But I have an opportunity to present one. And so they said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go think about it, pray about it. And I want you to write a name on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, give it to our business administrator, and he'll put it in a lockbox in the bank. And if you get hit by a bus or whatever, we'll at least have your, your preference. And boy, that was hard for me at the time, because there were so many, my brother Jeff, totally capable, Matt capable, Byron's not a preacher, so he wasn't on the list, but there were, plenty of capable people in-house. And so I prayed about it, and I wrote a name, and the name was yours. And I wrote that name, I think, 2 years before I told you about it. Just every year they'd ask me to do it, and I put it in a lockbox. And the only person I told about it was your mother. And so that was it. And that's about all that we didn't talk about it much more than that. And then personally, I began to feel just a disconnect that I'd never felt before in generations. I'd done reading about the fact that as a leader, you can relate to the generation above you, generation below you, maybe a couple. But I was beginning to feel a little disconnect with the future generations, one or two down. And I also was looking at the church, and I remember when we started this church, I was 32 years old. We were all young. I remember the first gray-headed person that ever came to our church. Do you remember? You remember Vern Jensen, Vern and Meggsy, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had, I don't know, 300 people. No, probably less than that at that point. And they showed up, and we were all excited because here's somebody with a little wisdom. They had a ministry background. They weren't on our staff. They were just people in the congregation, but they were only people with gray hair. And now, fast forward, how many ever years later, I'm looking out at the congregation. What hair I have left is gray, and a majority, not like 90% or anything like that, but probably north of 50% look like me. And I saw that number growing. And we were in a growing, thriving church. And so I thought about that. And then came the day that I was supposed to give a message about vision, and I can do that in my sleep. I love doing vision messages, and I had nothing. And I went to Chip Judd, and he told me that I will not be the guy. I can't build the church for the next generation, but I can help build leaders of the who will build the church for the next generation. And it really made me mad at first. It did. Chip's an 8 Enneagram, so he'll tell you what he thinks. But I pondered it, and I thought about it, and I thought, okay, it's probably time to really put some serious some serious engine around. So that's that's the kind of the behind the why and what I was thinking about when we began the transition.
Well,
So
I remember the first time that you shared that with me. I think I was around 26 years old, just about the name being on an envelope somewhere. And I was preaching maybe 2 or 3 times a year at that point, not much, and I wasn't very good at it. And so pretty much every Saturday, I would text you and ask if you wanted to grab a Starbucks. And you knew that that meant, hey, I'd love to run my message by you one last time before we get up on Saturday nights and preach it.
yeah,
And I remember at the end of our time together working on the message, you told me that. You said, hey, this is what's going on. And our team wanted me to give just a name. And I just wanted you to know that your name is on an envelope somewhere. And I didn't want, you to be surprised by that if something were to happen. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, why would you do that? I'm 26. I have so much respect for our leadership team at that point, for the people that had come alongside of you. I looked at all of them as mentors, as leaders, still do. And I just thought, I don't know why you would ruin this church by putting my name on it. And I remember we had a little conversation about that, and you explained some of the your thinking behind that and some of the reasons why. But I certainly didn't aspire to it, and I genuinely felt like I love Seacoast Church. I was 9 years old when you planted the church, and so I was able to kind of watch it grow and watch it make an impact, and it changed my life. I met my wife through Seacoast, and I plan to raise my kids through Seacoast. So I was like, please don't ruin my favorite church by putting me in charge of it. And some of that was just being young and insecure, for sure. But a lot of it was also like it didn't make sense to me. I didn't see it. I wasn't aspiring to it. I didn't want the weight of it. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to preach all of that stuff. I just didn't see myself as that guy. And when I looked around at the church in America, which I loved and respected, so many great leaders of churches like Seacoast, large, growing, dynamic churches, and I just didn't see myself as one of those guys. I didn't see myself with the charisma or necessarily the gifting that some of those guys had, and so yeah, I just remember thinking like, Dad has lost his marbles. I don't know what he's thinking, but this is not a good idea. Thankfully, we didn't start the transition that day,
right.
so had some time to think about that. And I was even thinking about what we did from there, as we tried to look at a few other models. A lot of people had very structured processes that they were going through and definitive timelines, and so we did start having some conversations like, okay, Dad, if this is what you think is going to happen, like when and how can I be preparing for that and some of that stuff. But we ended up doing it a lot different than really anybody else that we had seen, not because we thought our way was better, but because it fit our culture and who we were. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But
Yeah.
I just want to go on the record. I didn't think it was a good idea.
We, yeah, and some of the things that we did, and we'll get into exactly how we did it in a few minutes. But we at the behind the scenes discussions were, okay, Josh is in his mid to late 20s. We need to prepare him. And why did we skip a generation? We talked about that because there were very capable people, but it just seemed to be that we wanted to take a swing at the what was called then the next generation, and rather than do it incrementally. There's 20 some years between you and I, and just go for it. And so we did. But we talked about what experiences would you need. There was even talk early on about sending you to another church like Life Church. I know that came up, to say, let's get him outside of here, get him on staff somewhere that's a little different than here so that he can have some experiences. But ultimately, we didn't. We did move you around. I think we made you a campus pastor, ultimately over all the campuses. There are just several things that we did to get you some experience to what it was like. We got you up preaching more often than you did. And I always saw a gift It's so funny, Josh. People will, I know they do. They'll come to you now and they'll say, "Man, you're so much better than you were then." How does that make you feel?
It's the most discouraging compliment you can ever get, you know.
Yeah,
You were really bad, but you're a little bit better now. Nobody ever means it that way, but that's kind of how your internal voice hears that.
right.
I'm
And
glad you don't stink as bad as you used to
you're not
at
as
preaching.
bad as you
So
used to be. And we may get into our teaching team thing. We have to because that's part of your story. But
yeah, yeah.
people used to tell me early on, why are you having the young guys preach? I mean, they're just not very good. And then they would say, the young guys they're getting pretty good. You better be. I remember when several people said, you better be careful. They're going to get your job. And what they didn't know is behind the scenes, that's what we were trying to do. And now
That's
it's
awesome.
like I'm about sixth on the list of people's favorites. And I've had to deal with that with my ego. I thought about this what, fears, hopes. Um, did you have let me give you my fear first. And I'm sure you had fears. And I did have fears. I love the church. I love being a pastor, but I also know how hard it is sometimes. And I also know that in any leadership transition, there's going to be, people come, people go. There's going to be people who took the journey with me that are not going to take the journey. And in a Pollyanna world, everybody, stays and loves one another. And I didn't want you to have to feel some of the loss that I felt coming up through the system. I didn't. And maybe I've taken it, more personally. In the Enneagram, I'm a 3-4, and the 4 is the creative, and they feel everything. And so I've felt deeply some things over the years. And then the second thing was we had seen, a pretty cool trajectory over the last few years. And now there had been plateau, and I think the plateau had to do with, you know, um, probably a need for fresh ideas, fresh leadership, whatever that that we're leaning into, probably building as much as anything, and just the will of God at times. That that's where you are. But we'd seen some incredible growth, and I didn't want to see you experience going down the downside of the roller coaster hill. Do you understand what I'm saying? The other side.
Yeah.
I
Oh
really did.
yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
being honest, and
And
that was some fears that I had, and for
mine
whatever.
were similar. I think one of them that's just kind of the obvious, like when you look around at college football or professional sports, you have these legends, and I view you as a legend. I mean, Seacoast, there was really nothing like it. And we just saw it grow like crazy and reach so many people, much bigger than anything that we ever expected or were a part of. And so nobody wants to follow the legend. You want to be like the next guy after the guy. They usually label the guy that follows them interim. And so there was definitely like fear of failure. And man, I don't want to, again, I said it when I first heard you say it. I don't want to mess up the church by not doing a good job. And, so there was definitely that. I think there was a little bit of fear of just the pressure of the weight of leadership. I think nobody really understands it until you're sitting in the lead seat. I mean, everybody can empathize or sympathize or have thoughts about it, but I did get to grow up in a pastor's home, and so I was privy to some of it and some of the tensions that it would create in the home or stresses that you would carry. And so I think I worried that I would be able to handle that well, and just wanted to be the kind of person that would live with integrity and make it happen. And then I think just a lot of insecurities about my giftings and my wirings, because I think the reality is we are similar. Like I wasn't stepping into a church that needed a turnaround job.
Hmm.
It was healthy, maybe plateaued a little bit, but it was healthy. But also I'm a little different. I'm a little bit more collaborative in my decision making. Not that you're not, but that's definitely more of a team approach that I would
I
take to it.
wonder, Josh, just for a second, I want you to continue that, but for those listening, I wonder how much of that. And I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Um, I wonder how much of that is even generational. I'm a baby boomer pastor, and there are a lot of baby boomer pastors that are Moses, go to the mountain, get the vision, come back, and let's work it out. I see myself as a bit more collaborative than some of the baby boomer pastors that I know, some of the Moses model, but that's still in me. And you, again, I just watching how you lead right now, you're a lot more collaborative than I am.
Yeah. I think it's generational for sure, but I also think it's founder's mentality. I think
Hmm.
anybody that starts something, you're driving vision. Like you almost don't need a vision statement because you are the vision. Whatever you're excited about on a given year or season, that's what we're going to go after. And we did have, vision statements and all that good stuff, but I think that there's a founder mentality, and part of my job taking over is to preserve that mentality with our team because people can come into an organization and just not understand what it took to get there and what it's going to take to get to the next level. But also, I've seen in hindsight um, that probably the church didn't need another person to come driving hard. Not that you were hard drive, but like I think that the natural needs of a congregation, they're actually mourning. And again, we did it, and we'll talk about the unique way that we did it, where we mitigated a lot of that. But everybody's going through this transition together, and so my leaning to be a little bit more pastoral than apostolic. And I think I do have some apostolic gifts in me, but a little bit more of a shepherd, pastor,
Hmm.
and teacher. I think that that was healthy for the whole church to not have somebody come in and go, "Hey, on day one, we're making these 5 changes, and this is what we're doing." And again, different situations call for different types of leadership. But my piece of advice I give to anybody that I get a chance to talk to about it that's asking about stepping in from my seat, and maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, is
It's okay.
generally speaking, for the first year, think of yourself as a pastor more than you think of yourself as a leader.
Hmm.
Because I think the insecurities in us want to go prove that we have what it takes. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to do something big, or I'm going to make this change. Because the reality is, while you were going through a season of probably feeling less vision and a little plateaued in your own, we were seeing a lot of vision. And man, if I were in charge, I could do it this way, and we'd make these changes. And so your instinct is going to be to want to come in and go, let me do these things. Let me show. I think it's what the church needs. I want to prove that I've got what it takes to lead, all of that stuff. And really, I think in most cases, the church needs more of a pastor. So what do I mean by that? I mean, have coffees with people, spend time, lunches with your elders, lunches with your team, just spend time getting to know them. And you may feel like, well, we're not getting a ton of stuff done right now. But what happens is when it's time to make those decisions, like when we get to the crises of the
Hmm.
COVID or the moving into the new building or staffing reduction that we did, all these things that we eventually did, you've now got equity of trust and of buy-in from the people that you're leading. So they're more likely to want to take that journey with you and understand why you're making that decision. And the other side of it, obviously, is that you make better decisions because you have spent time with the people who are living in the world that is most impacted by those decisions. So you may see some different perspectives through that, just time building relationship, time pastoring, time being accessible to people. So um, I don't know how I got way over there on that,
No,
but I
that's
do think that
so
like
good.
born out of the fear of wanting to not fail, it almost caused me to want to be somebody that I'm not. And in hindsight, I can see, oh, maybe God actually wasn't wrong in the way he wired me. And
Hmm.
that maybe that was intentional and maybe that was healthy for the church
Yeah,
as we
and
move
you
through the
were
season.
you were so good at that. You really were. A couple of funny things. Like, you said you want to just jump in and go. You remember the meeting on my porch, on my back porch, with you and several other young leaders. I think Jason, your brother, was there,
Hmm.
and Ernest Smith, who went on and planted a church in Colorado, and I think Sean Wood, who planted Freedom Church. And I don't remember who else was there. Was that the group,
Josh
or
Walters might have been there. I
he
think
might
he had
he
he,
might
he
have
was
been?
at
Yeah,
that seat at that point, but
but we had just had kind of a art. our all-star leadership team that any church in America would have loved to have had, the Byron Davis and Jeff Surratt and Mac Lake and others who were there at the time, had all kind of, in a very short season, gone somewhere else. And it wasn't bad. I mean, it was all, I mean, it was sad. I cried like crazy at some of them. But we all left as friends, but it was like, okay, Mac went to, be a part of a church planting movement in Atlanta, ultimately went with the North American Mission Board, and did some great things, and now is back in Charleston with the leadership pipeline stuff that he does. And Jeff went to serve with Rick Warren and has done some amazing things since then. And Byron said, you know what? I signed on for just a few years. I'm going to go back into retirement so I can play golf and fish. They're all still my friends. But we were so close and we had accomplished so much. And they all left within a short period of time to go to their next. And I was scared. I really was. I was like, this is kind of what, other than God, that's kind of a weird statement, but I'm just going to be honest with you. I felt like, I don't know if I've got it to go. What are we going to do now? So I gathered you guys on the back porch and I said something like, okay, guys, these guys are gone. Number one, are you with me? And what I meant by that, I asked for a 1-year commitment. I know Ernest was going to go plant a church, and I think he stalled it a little bit, and I said, are you with me? And number two, can you step your game up? do you have more than you've got right now? And I remember you spoke up and said something like, and you can correct it, but this is what I remember, is can we step it up? We're just glad nobody had to die in order for us to get a shot at leadership here. Was it something like that?
Yeah, 100%. Like put us in, coach. Like
Yeah.
we've been kind of getting spots of playing time here and there, but we were ready. We were excited. And I think for you, having led for so long, having built that team and having relied on that team for so long, I can imagine you were feeling the weight of like doing it alone
I
again,
was.
and as they're gone. And so we were excited to jump in and learn, but also tackle whatever we needed. So it was very energizing for that entire group. And I think there's a leadership lesson in there, even just the question, are you with me? I think there are some people that lead maybe a little bit more abusively, like you have to be 100% in or out, and if you're not, get out. But there are moments in the life of a church and the life of a vision or a mission where it's like, I need to know, like, are we doing this together? And it put us on a decision point to go, are we? Like, yes or no? And Ernest and Sean both stayed longer, but in their heart was a church plant, and we
Hmm.
celebrated that, and we gave a ton of money to that, and we continue to support and love and encourage our friends that did that. But it put everybody kind of on a place of going, I need to evaluate, like, is this where I plan to be? Is this where I want to be? But yeah, we just wanted some playing time.
Yeah, and it was a little while. I mean, you got immediate playing time, but it was a little while before we actually did the transition to senior pastor leadership or lead pastor. But it's interesting. You were aggressive, ready to go, but when you came in, you were a shepherd, and you did. Even some people who were, and there were some on staff, and we told the staff it, and we're kind of mixing it all together. But I remember saying to the staff that some of the older ones, like me, some of the baby boomers, and you gave everybody an opportunity for a dignified out. Hey, if you want to go, if God's calling you, we'll support you tremendously, which very generously. But if you want to stay, there's a place and all of this. And I had some individual conversations and then some public ones with those my age that said, listen, if you've got to be up, if you've got to be the lead person on the stage in whatever ministry you're in, it's probably not going to go well for you now. If you can take a background seat and cheer on the next generation and make yourself valuable at that, you probably can be here for a long time. And I'm thinking of a couple of staff members that My goodness, one of them totally reinvented himself. I'm thinking of Michael
Yeah.
Morris, who reinvented himself, and he was one of my early staff members who is still here and still valuable, but saw that I don't have to be up front. I'm going
Yeah.
to, and but anyway,
Well,
where
and
was I?
what you told him is if you told Michael that if he could reproduce himself in the next generation, so not just cheer on, but like if you can learn
Hmm.
how to raise up more Michael Morrises, you'll you'll have a job as long as as long as you're breathing. And Michael has done that. Like he
He's
really did. It
training.
used to be that his door, yeah,
He's
all of our
training my
pastors go through
grandson,
his
your
training
son.
now.
He's training him right now, who thinks he might want to be in
Yep.
ministry sometime. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But
So that
but there
was
were some.
helpful. And I think,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, what I was going to
Well, I was
say.
just going to say that you,
Let me say it, and then you
all
can
you.
say it. What I was going to say is, in those conversations, there were some who had taken the journey with me, who were ready to opt out and maybe try something else. That you went and pastored them through their process, their grief, whatever. And some went, and they needed to, and it was good. It was all good. But when I say it's all good, I want to be real here. It was at times it hurt both sides. It was like, you know, uh, probably like Mama Eagle, kicking the little ones out. It wasn't, there were some pricks and scars and some of that kind of thing that we all had whenever there's a transition. But for some, it was very liberating, and they're doing great things now. And for some, though, you had to go and say, I want you to take the journey with me. And you want to address that at all? Or?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think specifically about like Sam and Joan. By the way, we've invested all of our resources in the Founding Pastors podcast studio, and I've got not a great one. So my lights just came on here. But I remember with Sam and Joan, who would be like a generation between us, like a younger brother to you, older brother to me type of
Mm-hmm.
guy. And he was wondering what he was going to do, if he was going to continue on or not, if he was going to move on to something else. And I remember Lisa and I both felt just in our spirit that we needed them to stay with us, that we wanted them to come take the journey with us, that for all kinds of reasons. We love them. We love being around them. We love the life-giving energy that they gave, but also we knew they were super connected in the church and that they carried a lot of influence. And we're like, man, we want you guys to be a part of this. And so we had them over for dinner several times and openly talked and processed. And I remember the day that he called me after I preached one weekend and was like, hey, if you can keep preaching like that, bro, I'm going to give you the rest of my career. I'm excited about it. And then, of course, like there were others who are phenomenal people. I think about Phil Strange, who led our Somerville campus, and Ron Hamilton, who led our West Ashley campus,
Mm-hmm.
that over a period of time, it became clear to them that God was calling them to do something else, and they weren't
Exactly.
to take this journey. And I think that it takes a lot of maturity on both sides to be able to navigate those conversations to go, hey, let's take our egos out of this and just discern what God is doing here and be able to celebrate as people move on. So I'm like you. I wanted everybody to stay. It's always personal when somebody leaves. It just is because we've always led the church like a family. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but it was super helpful to have some of your crew stay. But also in hindsight, I would never have thought this at the time. It was also super helpful to have some of them move on because
Mm-hmm.
it allowed room for guys and women that were more my generation, my people, to jump in and run with us for that leg of the journey.
Yeah. Um, the yeah, we could. I wanted to get just real quick in here before we move on somewhere else. That when we finally shoulder tapped you and said, "Okay, we think now is the time," you had an interesting observation about your role and how that might be different than mine, especially on the weekend. And talk about that just a little bit and how that's
Yeah.
worked itself out.
Yeah. Well, if you think about our journey over the last probably 10 or 15 years of you being in the lead pastor role, you had built up a teaching team. Your brother taught a lot for you. There were several of us younger guys that were teaching. And so by the time we made that decision to transition, I don't know how many weekends a year you were doing, but let's say it was 30-ish, maybe
That's probably
32, something like
30,
that.
32.
Um,
Yeah.
so I thought like, okay, you're still around, you're still willing to preach. You just don't want to lead the day to day of the church. And so I thought I could either jump in and take your 32 or more because I need to establish my voice as a leader and all of that good stuff. But I knew that in doing that, one, I didn't feel a grace to do it. And two, I knew that there would be a lot I would have to give up on the leadership side because I wasn't the leader or the communicator that you were at 57 when I took over around 34 or 35 years old. So I knew that there was going to be something that would have to give. And I'm like, we already have a healthy teaching team. And so I knew I had to do more than I was doing at that time. I was probably doing 6 a year,
Hmm.
before that. And I jumped it up to 12, 14, 15. And every year, you remember we would meet in December and talk about your role, my role moving into the next year. And
Hmm.
you would always want to do less. I would always want you to keep doing as many or more
You did.
because it was just awesome. Our church needed to continue to hear your voice. And so you would start to do less, I would start to do more. And at some point around 16, 18, 20, depends on the year, at some point, I kind of felt like, man, we've got a good team. We brought in some new communicators. Darren Patrick was with us, obviously, for several years. Adam Martin, more recently, Joel Delph. Josh Walters is on the team. We've got several women, Katie Walters, Lynn Stroy, that's done some teaching. My wife's done a little bit of it. And I just felt like, man, we've got actually a really good thing going on here. And I don't think I need to do 40 weekends a year. I don't think that's what the church needs from me. I don't think it's what I feel called to do. And so we didn't make a decision early on to go, this is how we're going to do it. But as we kind of stepped in and we're doing more, we got to this place where it was like, I think this is a good spot. I think this many times a year is a good spot. And so, I didn't know if it could work that way. And that's one of the things that I had to like put on the altar is the success in terms of how many people are attending, the church growing, are we planting new campuses, all that stuff. I had to put all of that on the altar when I took over because I felt like it was too much of a weight for me to bear. I couldn't control those outcomes. I knew I could do the right things in terms of how I was leading the team and, how I was spending the right time with the right people and my own personal integrity and prayer life. All that stuff I can control, but I can't control how many people are going to show up on the weekend. And I expected that it might dip some. But what's been surprising to me, at least in our little corner of the world, I know New Spring Church went through a very different type of transition, but we very close to Brad Cooper and their team. But the two of the larger churches in our region are doing the teaching part through team teachers, and it's both of them are growing. Our church has grown tremendously since we took over, to my surprise, and probably yours too, and others. And if you were to walk through our foyer on any given weekend at any of our campuses and ask people what they love the most about the church, they're going to tell you that they love the worship. They're going to tell you that their kids' ministry is great. But sometime in the top three or four things that you're going to hear, if not the top thing you're going to hear, is I love our teaching team. I love hearing God's word taught through these different voices and different generations, and that includes you still. So you still do. I don't know how many you'll do this year, 5, 6 times a year that you're still preaching, and it's awesome because you're able to continue to pastor as a father, grandfather to many of the younger people in the church, but as a peer to your people that are still here. And
Mhm.
I think one of the advantages of doing that, and I'll tell this story, and you can give your perspective if you want to, but you were still preaching. I was leading the day to day. You were still preaching more than me at that point. And I remember one time you got up on a weekend and you said something along the lines of, I don't know about you, but I think the music's a little bit too loud here. And it almost felt like a political rally. Like people are like, "Yes, finally somebody's saying it." And you knew we'd been getting some comment cards and we'd been getting some feedback about that, and maybe didn't like some of the songs that we were singing. And I'm like, "What are you doing? What like you're killing me, Dad." And then you said, "But you know what happened to me is today while we were worshiping, I looked down the aisle and I saw my grandson." and his hands were raised up in the air and he was worshiping. And it occurred to me that it's not about me anymore or my preferences. But man, what I'd love to see is a church where my grandkids love the Lord and are worshiping and are going after him. And so and it was like, oh wow, you just pastored your entire generation who were all thinking the same thing. And you reminded them without rebuking them or correcting them, but you reminded them that, hey, this isn't about us. And we want to be a church that reaches many generations. I don't think I could have led your generation to that conclusion.
Hmm.
I just don't think I could have because I was looked at as the younger guy making these decisions. And but so I think in doing it the way we did it, there are so many things that were helpful. But that was one conversation that I remember I wanted to like turn off your mic at the beginning of it, and then I was like standing on my feet cheering for you at the end of it because you just helped your generation navigate the things that are hard about transition without even telling them you were helping them navigate transition. So, anyways, I thought that was super helpful. And
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that
I think the
was,
team approach it
be-
worked.
believe it or not, that was intentional. To how can I help in, and it's not just music. You know what it is, all the typical things, and how can I help to readjust that it isn't about us. And I used to preach that in the beginning, and as we get older, we forget from time to time. And
Yeah.
now I walk in the foyer, and number one, I say I don't know anybody. I know more than I probably say, but I really don't. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm overwhelmed by the youth of the congregations. It's just amazing, and because we were able to expand the building just before COVID, which that's a whole nother another deal. But the growth has been phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think it's a
Well,
healthy
let me
church.
say something about the building, just because I think this could be helpful as a principle for people that are navigating transition. Um, we built the building that we're in, which is 2,500 seats, and it's a long story on how we got to it. But we built that after we made our transition, like after I was leading the staff and leading our trustees,
Mm-hmm.
and you were stepping back. But one of the things that you did is much of the fundraising that we did there,
Mm-hmm.
you led through those services. I did some of it, but you led
Mm-hmm.
through the services. We did together. I remember the initial like announcement of the building campaign, and you and I did it together, and it was cool. But you really did take the weight of the fundraising, and it just made me think about like transitions in the Bible. And obviously, there's no perfect one there, but I think when it comes to churches, the David and Solomon transition is one that can be helpful and useful. In this sense, one, you had Saul to David did not go super well. I think, at least from David's perspective and Saul's. And that was a guy who um, was called for a season, and then because of his own actions, he wasn't called. But the principle is that God had moved to a new leader, and everybody knew it except Saul, and he stayed too long, and he got insecure and jealous, and man, you can see sometimes that play out in churches. And then on the other side of it, you had with David, you had some of his sons, Absalom being one of them, that they were trying to grab a hold of something that was never given to them. And I think if
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to people who are succeeding a leader or serving on staff at a church, there are times that we are tempted to go try to grab something that God hasn't given us, and that's a recipe for failure. And it didn't only end Solomon or Absalom's life, but there were thousands of others that died in that war that happened as a result of that. And so then you've got David and Solomon, and what David did is he realized like God isn't calling me to build the building. He wouldn't call him to build the temple. But what he did call him to do is to leverage his relationships, to leverage his resources, to prepare the next generation to build that temple. And again, we didn't build a temple, we built a church building, but you were so helpful in having conversations with your peers who were the group of people in our church that were most capable of helping to
Mm-hmm.
fund that vision, and to leverage your influence, your vision, your resources to help us take the church into the next phase. And again, there's no perfect way to do it, but I think if I was an outgoing leader, I would be thinking, how can I be more of a David than I am a Saul? And if I'm an incoming leader, I'd be going, you don't really see Solomon making a grab at anything. It was actually his mom on David's deathbed that was like, hey, didn't you want Solomon to lead it? And he was like, yes, I do. And he watched his brothers lead through rebellions, multiple brothers. But he was patient and he served the vision of his father and the kingdom. And then eventually he was able to receive what God gave him, with humility. And what was his first thing he asked for? Was wisdom, which shows
Mm-hmm.
me that he didn't let his ego get in the way. It was like, man, I want to be humble. God, I need your help here. I need wisdom. And so, anyways, I think that's a helpful framework for like moving into the new building and planting new campuses when it's possible. When the outgoing leader is leading on good terms, there are ways that they can contribute in massive ways for the future of the church when the reality is God may not have called you to be the one to do that project or to build that building. So,
There are so many subjects that I want to delve into now. They just go through my head. One of them that maybe we won't, maybe we will. But one thing I noticed, and I don't want to get into theology of it at all, but in your leadership and your generational leadership, females play a bigger role than they probably played in mine. And part of that is that the makeup of your wife. My wife is a servant, very much behind the scenes, that is dependable, steady. That our staff, probably the favorite person on our staff, if you were to just put her hands up, whatever. But she's not going to get up front. She doesn't speak. That's not her gifts. And I knew that you coming in with Lisa being having different gifts, and some of them being upfront gifts, that they're and maybe it's your generation, I don't know, and I don't want to go very deep on this because there are other things I want to talk about, but is that a fair evaluation that
yeah,
there's
yeah, it is. And Lisa's story, her background was in medicine and she was running a nonprofit and I won't get into all of that, but we really felt like when I showed up to the office one day as I forget what my title was, but I was leading our campus pastors and our weekend experiences. And I came home that day as the lead pastor of Seacoast, which is a whole nother story. It's kind of that was the moment that you were like, hey, I think it's time. And we're like, well, what kind of timeline? And you were like today. And it was like, okay, let's go. And but when I came home, we felt like God was through several different confirmations out of his word and other people that spoke this into us that we were running two parallel tracks that were both really good at that point, and we felt like, man, we're going to need to do this together. Like this is going to be something that like it's going to take all of both of us to do it. It didn't mean she came on staff right away or any of that, but it was like, man, we know that we're going to harm our family if we don't bring our tracks together for this season. And yeah, she's just wired differently. And so also doesn't love speaking, but she's gotten pretty good at it. Just
mm-hmm,
watched her host our women's conference with her our sister-in-law Jenna, and she's got a presence about her, and it's
mm-hmm,
amazing to see her step into that gifting. But yeah, mom, I think we would all say our family wouldn't have survived
mm-hmm,
the church plant of Seacoast, and probably the church wouldn't have survived it without her gifts that were needed in that season, which were more stabilizing, kind of keeping
mm-hmm.
things on the tracks and making sure people got paid through payroll and all the things that she did. And so, but yeah, I think that, and it may be generational too. Like right now, our director of operations is phenomenal, Jenny Young, just incredibly gifted at what she does. And there was a lot of tension early on, not just male female tension, but I think just um, she comes from a corporate background and we're ministry and we're just
Mm-hmm.
we've always done this. I think it's you used to say it was an accidental megachurch, mom and pop deal that just
Yeah,
kept growing
it is.
and so much of the way I lead is on instinct. And it's great to surround yourself with people like Jenna who are more on like facts and
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and let's make sure. And so it helps us make better decisions, I think. But yeah, definitely have a team that's got more women involved in it. And I think the church is better for it. And I think that you didn't not have women on your team, but
Mm-mm.
I think it's just yeah different in the way that we did it.
Yeah. Um, I have a couple of things I want to say, but and I know we're getting. Can we extend this? Can you go past 1 hour a little bit or
I
not?
can, yeah.
Okay. we'll do
I'm
that.
just prepping for the weekend, and
Yeah,
the service will all know if I didn't get a time on it. So no, I'm
exactly.
good. I've got margin.
Exactly. So the way we did it, and I was thinking about that this morning, I don't know if it was the right way. Um, I think so for us, but we never had a coronation service. Let's not call it coronation. What do you call it? Passing the baton.
Commissioning,
Yeah.
pass the baton. Yeah.
How did you feel about that? How do you honestly? How do you feel about that? I mean,
I think it was brilliant. I think it was the best, one of the best decisions we made. And again, it can't be done everywhere, but it probably can be done in a lot more places than do it. And here, let me tell you why. There definitely maybe was an ego part of me that was like, man, do people even know that I'm leading here? And you would say that, I would say that. The little slide underneath my name when I would preach was lead pastor. What we did is your title was senior pastor.
hmm
And when we made the transition, you went from senior pastor to founding pastor, and I went from whatever I was doing to lead pastor. And you would say it, and you would do it in very self-deprecating ways, like, "Hey, they changed my title, and they asked me to not come to meetings anymore, but I asked them if they'd let me preach some still and give me a paycheck. I'd still." I'm okay with it. It's stuff like that. But so it wasn't that we were keeping it a secret or that we weren't talking about it at all. But I think what happens when you do that baton passing service, and certainly there are um, examples even in scripture of these moments
hmm
where, so I'm not saying you should never do it, but what happens when you do is you put everybody in the church on decision. So am I going to go on this next leg with a new leader? That may not be a bad thing, but it kind of forces people to think that way just by doing that moment. And it also it brings about, I think, a lot of emotions, even grief, that I would say that, man, even though Greg's still around, he's not our leader anymore, and they're gonna grieve that. And the way that we did it allowed people to embrace me and my leadership um, without having to fully grieve you and yours. Now, I'm sure people were bummed that you weren't preaching as much as you used to and some of that stuff, but it was like it kind of allowed our people to work through this transition in a gradual, healthy way versus this like trauma that, oh gosh, we've got a new leader
hmm
now. And so I think, for us, we definitely went through a plateau for seasons. Some of it was probably transition because I know there are families that left during that season. Again, good people left for good reasons. But generally speaking, and I mean, I don't know how long it's been, 14 years now, since the transition actually happened. The church has grown. We've planted several new campuses. We've seen, and I think part of that is that we didn't have this major speed bump at this transition moment. That for me, the only reason I would have wanted to do it is for my own validation and ego. And so again, I've got a lot of friends that are doing transitions and a lot of people doing it really, really well. But I know there are some that would tell me right now that we think that doing that moment probably cost us a lot of people and a lot of resources and tide money that was unnecessary to do because a lot of them are father sons. It's like the father's still there, still preaching, still it's similar situations that we were in,
hmm
and I've even had some of them say, "Man, I wish we hadn't done that. I wish we had just been a little bit more patient in that process."
What what could I have done that would cause real tension for you and maybe would not have allowed me to have the nice office that I have right now? That would have made it real difficult for you. Then maybe it'd have been better that I totally left. I know I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question, but
Well, no, something comes to mind right away because it was a tension we had to navigate early. I remember there was somebody on our staff that didn't love a decision that I had made, and they had been your person for so long, and you had been theirs that they came to you, and instead of coming to me on it. And I just remember like there were times where that was handled great, and times that it probably wasn't. We definitely didn't do everything right
right.
every time. I think when you have a culture of relationship, you can make a lot of mistakes in that. But I think that one thing that you could have done to have made it really hard is fielded a lot of those types of conversations and then went and tried to fix it for them.
hmm
What you would do is you'd hear them, and then you would set parameters or expectations of, hey, I think you should go talk to Josh about that. I think you should go, rather than you jumping in and usurping my authority, you sent them through the proper channels without, slapping them on the wrist for coming to you. But because everybody, the staff's learning, how does this new thing work and how am I
Hmm.
supposed to handle it? And I've always gone to Greg. And so I'm going to naturally still go back to what my instincts are. And so I think that could have been something, not only with staff, but with people in the church, that when they would come and be frustrated with different things, because you still were in small groups and you still had your team of people. I think generally speaking, you did a great job of just championing us publicly, championing us privately. And I think if there was a hint of, Greg's not sure this is going to work, or Greg's not fully on board with this, I think it would have been a lot harder for us to fully be able to lead. So I think that's one thing. One thing I wish we had done, and we've never talked about this, so you may want to edit this out for future things. I think one of the tricky parts of our transition is that our whole family is involved and loves the church.
Hmm.
And so when you were the pastor and we were all the kids, it's very normal and natural for all of us to look to dad as also our pastor. When we stepped in, I think we felt uncomfortable. Like, how do I pastor my brother, my sisters, and
Hmm.
everybody's all in and still is to this day. Like, we are all.
We're all
Jessica
still
doesn't work
here.
for the church, but
Yeah.
we're all still here. We love each other. We've got a great family dynamic. But I think early on, like maybe
Mm.
even before the transition, if we had done some family meetings to talk about it, maybe even brought a Chip Judd or something like that in to kind of help all of us
Mm.
navigate the weirdness and the just trickiness of doing something like this as a family, it might have helped us avoid some, tension and conflict that we felt, because it's just different. It's not normal and natural for a sibling to go to a sibling, and of course we had to learn, like, we don't want to demand that from them. Like,
Hmm.
we all still look to you as pastor in so many ways, but like when it comes to staff role, and some of that stuff, it just, some of those things were hard, and thankfully we've all come through them. I would say really, really well. And like everybody, like we are running in our lanes and championing each other's gifts and doing it well.
But
So,
that's a
but if we had
great
to do it over again, I might would have
that's a
had some family meetings.
that's a great critique. We should have, and we didn't. We should have done that. And that is a good thing for others that might be in a similar situation. Um, it's hard even in the corporate world when you got peers that one of them becomes the leader or the boss, and makes it even more complicated when it's family. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think we could have done better on that. Um, let me just I want to get just a few things. I want to make sure that I hit a few things. I remember too, before I do, um, because I'm a musician, was in a band, all this kind of stuff, led worship in the early days here. I'm very involved in that, very critical of all of that, and you know, um, whatever. You can say a lot of things, but I would give what I call immediate feedback to the worship leaders. I love them. Most of them loved me, okay, and they still do. Some maybe not so much, but um, I would, if I didn't like a song they were doing, or if I didn't feel like the congregation was involved in the song, I would text them while they were singing and say, you know what, great try, but let's don't sing that again in the next service. I don't like that song. And I can remember you coming to me after I did that one time, and you said, you did it as diplomatically as you can, but you said, Dad, I might like that song. Okay, it just might
Well,
might be something I like. Would you run those through me before you do that? And so that was
Exactly. Well, and part of it was like, even if I didn't like the song, I knew that they had taken the last 6 months to
to
write the
write it.
song.
Yeah,
It's like you basically called their baby ugly. And I was like, let's figure out a better way to do that than while they're leading worship on the platform. But
yeah.
so yeah, those things are, I think you have instincts as a founding leader. And part of what made the church so great is that you did provide great feedback quickly. And so yeah, we just had to learn how. And it was an area that I'm not a musician,
Hmm.
and so I'm not as tuned in to some of those things. So I was actually super grateful for the feedback, because that song, guess what? We're not doing it anymore, and it was the right decision. But like helping me do it in a more a diplomatic way with the team,
Yeah. Yeah.
was helpful.
All right. I want to throw that in. So here's what I think every senior pastor should do, or lead pastor, founding pastor, if they want a healthy transition. Let me run through just a couple of things. I'll just comment on a couple of them. But number one, start early. I remember Tom Mullen, he and Todd were doing their deal. And I was doing a podcast with Tom asking him about all that. And in the podcast, he said, Greg, you really should go ahead and do that with Josh. We're live, but it's a podcast. But he said, because I was thinking, way down the road, whatever. But at least start early to think about it. Healthy transitions take time. I would say check your ego. You got to let go of the need to be the guy and celebrate the next leader. I quit coming to meetings. Now, I don't like meetings all that well, but here's what I noticed when I was in a meeting. First of all, I had to learn how to not talk first, because when the leader talks first, which I have a tendency to do, that's the end of the conversation. We know where the leader stands, so why would we argue with that? Okay, for the most part. But even when I learned that, I'd be sitting in the room and maybe I'm the second to last person to speak or last person to speak because Josh is leading. And in the early years, you could watch them. They're all turning to me. What's Greg going to say? Okay. How does Greg feel about it? Even looking at body cues and all of that. And that's not the case now. I mean, it's, if I walk into a room, they're very honoring, but they say, are you here to be a blessing or do you want to be a part of the meeting? And, but in the early years, it was important. So I quit going to meetings. I'm not going to go. Because it's never going to be, about the next level of leadership. But check your ego. If you got to be the guy, get some counseling. All right. Build trust publicly. We've talked about that a little bit. Constantly affirm. One thing I think that has been very healthy about this situation is that we honor one another, not just you and I, but extreme honor culture, I know that can get yucky, but I would say honor culture is good in that you honor one another, not just honor the man of God, honor up, honor down, honor all around. And I really sense that has been the situation here. And that's important in building trust publicly. One of the first things you guys did was change the logo. I hated the logo. I like the old logo. In fact, we have t-shirts right now with what do we call it? The vintage logo. And
Yep.
those are hugely popular. Most popular thing we have, I think. I was a part of creating the first logo. We had it for years and years and years. And so I had to learn right away my wife told me, you know what? This is stupid. Who cares what the logo is? And occasionally when you guys would make a decision that I thought was, I don't know. And I'd go to Debbie and she would say, you know what? It might not be the right decision, but there wasn't anybody leaning over your shoulder and my shoulder early on. You got to let them make the decisions that they make and not go around and talk to people about that. And
Yeah.
so, that's very, very important. Build trust. Shift authority, not just titles. You got to give away real decision-making power before the official handover, okay? Whether you do a big meeting or not, but not just titles. And I know guys, I'm not mentioning names, that have transitioned and it hasn't worked. And part of it is because they still kept the final say, and if you're going to transition to next generation, that's not going to work. Stay available, but not in control. I think I'm here. I'm a mentor to you when you need it. And I try to encourage without interfering as best I can. Now, if it was just you and somebody else, you could probably list a whole list of ones where I do interfere. I'll own it, but I try not to. And then empower the next generations, the next leaders' vision, support them when they make changes. Talked about that a little bit, even if it looks different from how you did it. And here's really important, and this probably should have been number one, but find your next, okay? If you're an entrepreneurial leader, that's what I am. I'm an entrepreneurial leader. And if I don't have a next, I'm going to meddle into whatever was previous, okay? And so part of the reason I haven't meddled much at Seacoast is because I've had ARC, I've had the retreat at Church Creek, more than I can say grace over. But I know, guys, if you don't have next, you begin to try to fix and correct because that's what you do. You're an entrepreneurial leader. So make sure you've got that. Okay? How
Great.
you leave is as important as how you led. Did you get that? How you lead or how you leave is just as important as how you led. All right, what about you, Josh? What would you say to younger leaders?
Listen, I think that's great, and I think that's actually probably the more important part of the equation is how the founding person leaves. Both are a big deal, so I'll give less, but for me, I would say I'd start with the honor piece as well. I think that people are wondering, they may not say it out loud, but they're wondering, was he forced out? Are they treating him well? Are they, and so I think that whether you're taking over a church, whether you're taking over a youth ministry, taking over a campus, there is never any harm in just being honoring to the people that went before you. I didn't build this church. God did. We all know that. But you and mom built this thing, and so it's very easy for me to stand up and just thank you and be grateful for the your ceiling that became our starting point, and to just honor you. And it's not hard to do. And so I don't know why you wouldn't. Obviously, if there's moral failures, you have to be sensitive in how you do that. But I think that honor is attractive. I think honor shows humility. It shows that you're not trying to just prove yourself. So I think that it's very important for the incoming leader to just be honoring of because when you honor that pastor, you're also honoring all of his peers. You're honoring the people who sacrificed, who gave to get you to the place that you are. And so be a person of honor. I think it's really important. Second thing I would say is have the hard conversations. And what I mean by that is that when, especially me, my first job here at Seacoast was on the facilities team. So literally, like when I became the leader of the Mount Pleasant campus, I was now leading people who were my spiritual mentors, people who had helped me navigate through marriage crises, people who I looked up to with great respect. And so it's awkward when you start leading people who used to lead you. And so rather than just ignore it, and then, of course, when we took over the church, I'd already had so many of those conversations, which is why I was grateful that you guys put me in some different positions. I didn't know what you were doing, but it helped me learn how to do this. But I remember walking into Pastor Jerry McSwain's office. He was over all of our small groups at the time, and I had just learned so much from him. And I remember when I became his boss, his leader, sitting down with him and saying, "Hey, Jerry, this is awkward." His leader had already, yeah, Mac Lake had already told him the transition was going to happen, and so it was like, dude, this is awkward. But here's what I want you to know: I so value your wisdom. I so value how you pastor people, and I'm not coming in here feeling like I need to come in and teach you how to pastor. You're already doing that well, and you've done it for me. But here's what I do need from you. I need you to understand the weight of your voice. And I need you to, if you're not on board with something, come to me, talk to me about it, be direct with it. Let's work it out. But publicly with our team, I just need your voice carries a lot of weight here, and I need you to help. I need you to endorse me. I need you to, and we just had this conversation. It was super awkward, but it was super helpful. And so you're gonna be stepping into leading something you didn't start, leading people that you didn't hire, leading people that you may not even know very well. Lean into them. Again, I said it, pastor before you lead. And then the last thing that I would say, just on a real practical level, be generous. Just be generous. And that's going to look different in every church, but like, um, be generous in how your board pays the outgoing leader and how you support them moving forward. And I just think that the cost of a failed transition or a really rocky transition is a whole lot more than whatever you might need to pay the outgoing leader. And I know it's an awkward subject to bring up, but I just think that it's a practical thing that if you can just be generous and talk to your team about what does it look like for us to be super generous. I think about a church that came to us and asked them to take one of their campuses over, and the leader of that church, phenomenal guy, did it with a great spirit, and you know and so as we talked about that, I was like, man, I just want to be super generous to this person because they're coming with all of this stuff and they're allowing us to take over. And so in terms of their office, it was like, no, keep your office. It'd be great. We'd love to have you around. And he was, again, He was the kind of leader that
Amazing.
wasn't meddling and wasn't, he was really supportive of what was going on. But then even the salary or portion of it, it was like, man, we want to be generous. And then when that season came up for that, we just decided we're going to extend it a little bit further because we feel like it's what we want to do. And so if you can, and however you can, be generous to the outgoing leader. And I just think God's going to honor that. I think generosity is a core principle of who he is and his generosity towards us. And so try to be a generous leader. We could talk for a long time, but those would be the top three that I would say just um,
It's good.
advice I'd give to incoming leaders.
That's good. And there's a lot more I'd like to talk about. Maybe we'll do another podcast and tackle some of those specifically. But this has been great. Um, we kind of titled this "You Don't Have to Crater the Church" or whatever it was. I don't know what the title is. Somebody gave it one, and I liked it. But the church has grown. And I won't go into specific numbers because every church is unique and different, but we had, north of, we had a lot, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And now there's probably nearly double that.
Yeah.
And not that that is the end all and be all, but what it says is that God can continue to celebrate and move and bless in continuous generations. And what I would love to see is that when you're done being a no, you're a, what's wrong with me? What's the word? You're in between me, and the next guy. You're
Interim.
you're
Yeah.
an interim, and you have a philosophy on that. But when you're
Yep.
done being an interim, I think it'd be beautiful to hand off just even more healthy, and then see it just do more than it's ever done. And I really
Yeah.
do have faith for that, and believe that God can do that.
I do too. And I would say to the leaders that are stepping in, start thinking about your legacy in terms of like decades and centuries instead of what you want to get accomplished next year. And I think even just casting that vision that, man, I want to see our church be a growing, life-giving church for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Not many do that, but how cool would that be? And then it will help shape how you lead and what matters, what's important, what's not in light of that. But yeah, I mean, obviously we both would say, glory to God. I can't look around and
Mm-hmm.
go, man, there's this thing we're doing that's
Mm-hmm.
making it grow. Like God has been really generous and faithful to us and bringing the right people, the right team and worship and in teaching and then the leaders that have stepped in to just invest their lives as volunteers to serve in small groups and to serve our next gen. And so we're just super thankful and grateful. And I agree. This does not have to be like a transition does not have to be a horror story.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really cool and fun to be a part of. And my prayer is for anybody watching this, that's going to be your story too. It'll look way different than ours, but that it's going to be a story of God's grace and of continued kingdom impact through the church that you're leading.
I love it. And my vision for years were not just to be a prevailing church, but I would look at the great churches of the 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s or 2000s or 2010. And I wanted, I don't know, I think it was God's will. I hope it was God's will. But I wanted to see Seacoast be a prevailing church for multiple generations. And I think by God's grace, we're seeing that happen. And so thanks, Josh. Thanks for being a part of this. And hopefully this is helpful for those of you who are looking at where do you go next and how do you transition to the next generation. And thank you again also for supporting the retreat at Church Creek. I thank you, Josh, that you guys have that as a part of your vision. And so many churches are supporting and seeing how important it is to take care of the leaders so that they can lead well and finish strong. And so we'll see you next time.